Listen to this very carefully. Scoot up next to your radio. I don't want you to miss a word. I don't want you to miss anything. I have told you over and over and over again for years. I wrote it in my book. My book's been in print for years. That this is a Nazi thing. The Nazis are coming. Socialism. Nazi means National Socialism. The Nazi Party was called the National Socialist Workers' Party. Do you understand what I'm telling you? There is no such thing as oppression on the right. There is no such thing as Nazis on the right. There are no fascists on the right. A scale measures opposing states. All the way on the left, you have total control. All the way on the right, you have absence of any control. All the way on the left, it's called communism, where the state owns and controls everything, even you and even your underwear. It's where you pretend to work and they pretend to pay you. It's where if you say the wrong word, you disappear forever. It's where they have millions and millions of people in labor camps doing slave labor. It's where pogroms are held and whole populations are murdered, slaughtered one by one. Any political opposition is murdered. All the way on the right is total absence of control. It's called anarchy. Anarchy is terrible. It means if I see your shirt and I want it, I just shoot you in the head and take it and nobody cares. Except you and you're dead. In between is the range between these two things. Just above communism are Nazis. Somewhere in the middle is a republic, which is the United States of America. This is not a democracy, never was never intended to be. If you don't believe it, read the writings of our forefathers who warned us against democracy. During the past several months in the American press, the Democrats have frequently denounced the Republicans and other people on the right, the militias, patriots, Christians, as Nazis, due to their attempt to control runaway federal spending. How very ironic. I remember the Nazis, and let me share with you a little about them and recall some of their exploits. This appeared in the Arlington, Washington Times on June the 7th. It's a letter to the editor, and I'll tell you who wrote it at the end. Listen to every word, ladies and gentlemen. You're not going to believe what you hear, but it is absolutely true. During the past several months in the American press, the Democrats have frequently denounced the Republicans and everybody else on the right, militia, patriots, Christians, as Nazis due to their attempt to control runaway federal spending. How very ironic. I remember the Nazis. Let me share with you a little about them and recall some of their exploits. First of all, Nazi was gutter slang for the verb to nationalize. To nationalize. The Baader-Meinhof gang gave themselves this moniker during their early struggles. The official title of the Nazi Party was the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany. Hitler and the Brown Shirts advocated the nationalization of education, health care, transportation, natural resources, manufacturing, distribution, and law enforcement. Hello, anybody home? One ringy-dingy, two ringy-dingy. Does that ring any bells for you folks? Let me continue. Hitler came to power by turning the working class, unemployed, and academic elite against the conservative republic. After Der Führer's election, the Nazi Party ceased being a political conspiracy and was transformed into a fashionable social phenomenon. Party membership was especially popular with educators, bureaucrats, and the press. Being a Nazi was politically correct. They called themselves, quote, and this is an exact quote, the children of the new age of world order, end quote, and looked down their noses at everyone else. As Hitler accrued more power, he began referring to his critics as, quote, the dark forces of anarchy and hatred, end quote. Anyone who questioned Nazi high-handedness in the German press was branded a, quote, conservative reactionary, end quote. Joseph Goebbels, Minister of Communications, proclaimed, and I quote exactly, quote, a new world order, end quote. The Nazi reign of terror began with false news reports on the radio and in the newspapers. Paramilitary groups of Poles, Jews, Bohemians, and Gypsies were said to be arming themselves to overthrow the, quote, New World Order, end quote, and Hitler demanded that all good people register their guns so that they wouldn't fall in the hands of terrorists and madmen, and that's a direct quote, quote, fall in the hands of terrorists and madmen, unquote. Right-wing fanatics of the old order who protested firearms registration were arrested by the SS and put in jail for fomenting hatred against the government of the German people. Then the Reichstag, that was the government building, was blown up, and Hitler ramrodded an emergency anti-terrorist act through Parliament that gave the Gestapo extraordinary powers. The leader then declared that for the well-being of the German people, all private firearms were to be confiscated by the Gestapo and the Wehrmacht, which was the federal law enforcement and the military. German citizens who refused to surrender their guns when, quote, the jackboots, end quote, Gestapo, came calling were murdered in their homes. By the way, the Gestapo was the Federal Marshal Service of the Third Reich. The SWAT team was invented and perfected by the Gestapo to break into the homes of the enemies of the German people. When the Polizei, Bewachen, or local police, refused to take away guns from townsfolk, they themselves were disarmed and dragged out into the street and shot to death by the SA and the SS. Those were the Nazi versions of the BATF and the FBI. When several Lutheran ministers spoke out against these atrocities, they were imprisoned and never seen again. The Gestapo began to confiscate and seize the homes, businesses, bank accounts, and personal belongings of wealthy conservative citizens who had prospered in the old republic. Pamphleteers who urged revolt against the Nazis were shot on sight by national law enforcement and the military. Gypsies and Jews were detained and sent to labor camps. Mountain roads throughout Central Europe were closed to prevent escape of fugitives into the wilderness and to prevent movement and concealment of partisan resistance fighters. Public schools rewrote history, and Hitler youth groups taught children to report their parents to their teachers for anti-Nazi remarks. Such parents disappeared. Pagan animism became the state religion of the Third Reich, and Christians were widely condemned as right-wing fanatics. Millions of books were burned first, and then people. Millions of them burned in huge ovens after they were first gassed to death. Unmarried women were paid large sums of money to have babies out of wedlock and then given medals for it. Evil was declared as being good, and good was condemned as being evil. World order was coming, and the German people were going to be the peacekeepers. Yes, indeed. I remember the Nazis, and they weren't Republicans or right-wing or patriots or militias. They were socialists, and they were monsters. And this letter was written by Thomas Colton Rutherford from Arlington, Washington. Did any of that sound familiar to you? It is word for word what is happening today in the United States of America. As I have told you many, many times before, what happened in Germany during Hitler's rise to power is exactly what is happening in the United States of America today. And if you don't want to believe it, and if you want to sit on your lazy sheep butts until they come and drag you out in the street and shoot you, then you go ahead and do it. There's a lot of us who ain't gonna be there with you. Got that?